Well, we've taken some time and talked about kind of the ins and outs, how the basics of networking with the idea of how do we move people from just having an acquaintance or a relationship, sharing a little bit about the vision to actually moving them to be on the launch team. Then we talked a little bit about building the books, the basics of accounting and bookkeeping, because you really want to have that established as you're establishing the launch team and moving forward on the groundwork of this new church. Now, let's kind of get into the nitty gritty of launch team, what you can expect, what do you do? Let's just talk about the details of this. So, let's begin talking and answering kind of these four key questions. When should we meet? Where should we meet? What should we do when we meet? And what do we do in between meetings? First of all, when should you meet? I don't care when you meet, just don't do it Sunday morning. Sunday morning, the moment that a launch team begins to gather on Sunday morning, the tendency is people all of a sudden assume we've made it and they let off the gas pedal. So don't go to Sunday mornings until you're ready to actually have your grand opening as a church. I would look at maintain your launch team gatherings on a Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Keep that Sunday morning time zone free. It will also allow you to go and take field trips with your team to go observe how other churches do certain things. So leverage the Sunday morning time to take them on site in other locations to be able to train, to teach, to observe, to come up with innovative ideas that you can begin to implement even in your new church. So when should we meet? Again, anytime except Sunday morning. Avoid Sunday morning. Where should you meet? Places that are cheap. We've began both of our church plants meeting in our home until we outgrew the home. Then you could look at possibly finding a community group. I know in Arizona specifically, the firehouses actually had a community group that nonprofits could use for free. So we did that at some of our gatherings. We've met in karate dojos after hours. We've met in all kinds of different unique places and even in some churches. My biggest thing would tell you don't overpay. If you have a church that says, yeah, we're more than happy to lend you space, but it'll cost you $500 a week or it'll cost you $250, I wouldn't spend it because at this stage of the game, it's not that important. If you can meet close to the proximity that you're looking at having your grand opening, fabulous. But even then, it's not necessary. Those people that are totally bought in and a part of the launch team, they're willing to drive a little bit out of their way in order to help get this church up and going. And so you don't want to make the meeting 45-minute drive away, but it doesn't necessarily need to be in the backyard of the location that you're looking at launching the churches as well. So find space that works well for you. Even if you could find space where you could drop the kids, that works well. If you're wanting to have something with kids ministry early on, if you have volunteers from other churches that'd be willing to fulfill that, fantastic. Sometimes, like in this last church plant, we actually hired some daycare workers just to come and take care of the kids for that hour that we had our adult launch team meetings. What should we do when we actually meet? Early on, you're going to be talking about vision, values. Begin to implement some basic preaching experiences. I like kind of mixing a preview experience along with the business side. And so, what does I mean by that? What we've done is we do like a 45-minute scaled back church experience where we sing a couple songs, we'd make some announcements. I would do a shortened version of a sermon around a 20-minute devotional, but it gives people in the room a feel for kind of what they can expect even when it comes to the preaching, let alone the worship. And then we would pause and say, hey, at this point, we're going to begin to shift gears and go into more of the business conversations surrounding the church. And so we're going to split up into tables and into groups. So if you're interested in children's, you can go over there, music and production over here, guest services here, and you kind of begin to focused conversation on developing each of those groups and those teams to really begin to own what is it going to require for us to get this church up and going off the ground. And that's a great time to begin to invite people, hey, if you're interested, just go check it out and spend a little bit of time. Otherwise, they have the opportunity to leave, but they leave having already experienced a little bit of a taste of what the church would actually do. Then what do you do in between meetings? Well, first of all, you want to continue to connect relationally. So you're going to continue to press in, get to meet new people in the community, share what's going on. This is also an opportunity for you as the planter to spend relational time with those that are on the launch team. Build trust, have them over to your home, eat meals together, just hang out. That camaraderie will be very important in helping the church get up and going. But this, again, this is a time to begin to explore and to become innovative and teach and train your teams. And so consider having a set up and tear down team. If you're in a portable situation, go help other church plants in and around your area actually do a set up and tear down, and then come back and give a report. Go out to lunch, talk about what did you like, what did we learn, what would you do different, and then begin to make notes. And you'll find that they're fired up for this, what's about to come and what they're about to experience. Same thing, look at doing it with children's ministry, guest services team, worship production. Like, take them out, expand their box, and who knows the innovative ideas that they're going to bring to the table following that. At some point, you're probably going to look at wanting to create also a launch team covenant. A good covenant kind of outlines and clarifies the overall expectations of the team. In it, you want to articulate the vision, you want to articulate the values, and even have a very specific time commitment. Again, I shared in previous conversation that 3 years is a good mark for people to kind of think of. And knowing that it's not going to be super easy, it's going to take some long-term and longevity to help get this church up and going. But at the same time, recognizing it may be different. It will be different than what people expect, and people will want a way to get out. But when you give them 3 years, it kind of goes, okay, we can manage this for 3 years. And if it's not what we expected it to be, then we can take off. Here's the thing, your launch team, 50% of your launch team is going to turn over within the first 2 years. No matter what you do. And some of it's just things totally out of your control. It could be job changes. It could be other reasons. A lot of it too is people just realize this isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's different, and they'll end up walking away. But just to expect about 50% of your launch team are going to walk away. Now, in the more pioneering situations where you may be parachuting in, where you see a lot of people coming to Christ, even in those early phases of your launch team meetings, I wouldn't walk them through and require them to sign a team covenant as to what it is. Just bring them in. They don't know any different. They're going to be loyal to you because that's where they found Christ in that process. When it comes to size and personnel, here's a good rule of thumb is you want to have 40, and I would say 40 adults on your launch team before you actually have a grand opening for your church. And if you do it well, if you mark it well, you can actually have 3 to 4 times the amount of your launch team at your grand opening. If you look at spending a little time and a little effort and even a little bit of money into doing excellent marketing and having a really strong outreach plan. To give you kind of a synopsis, our first church plant, again, we launched in a movie theater. We launched with 2 services. We had about 70 adults that were committed to helping us get this church up and going on the launch team before we actually had a grand opening. We grand opened and had 356 people show up to the movie theater on our first Sunday. Now, you don't maintain those numbers. You are going to drop a little bit, but we hit the ground running, and that allows you to actually do that. The second church plant, we were about 80, 85 on our launch team before we had a grand opening, but we grand opened with 450 showing up at our grand opening. And so think through, you need key personnel, and 40 is a good rule of thumb. And the reason is this. One of the issues you're going to have to deal with is simply answering the question, who are the minimum personnel we need in order to actually do church, in order to launch this church on the first Sunday? And here's kind of 5 categories you want to think through. Number 1, you're going to have worship. So how many people is that going to require when it comes to the tech, AV side, let alone who's going to be on stage actually leading the music? You don't want to have more people on the stage than you actually have sitting in the audience. How about when it comes to children's ministry? How many people are you going to need to do children's ministry to do it well and effectively? How about handling the finances? How's offering going to be taken? Who's going to count it? Who's going to deposit it? What about guest services? Who's going to welcome people when they walk in and help people find their way? How many people are you going to need to do that well? And then what about community life? Just running and helping people get connected, doing the follow-up. Those are 5 critical areas. And when you begin to think through those 5 areas, it's easy to come up with, yeah, we're probably going to need about 40 people in order to actually do this well. You want to be careful, again, launching too early with too few people, because the chances are you can overwhelm them and actually burn them out quicker than what you would want to. Here's some important tips as well in this stage of the game for you as a leader. Think speed of the leader, speed of the team. Your launch team isn't going to outrun you as the leader. And so it's important for you to understand the pace. And there's going to be moments where you're going to have to hit the gas pedal, and you're going to have to call people to a higher way of living and a higher expectation, because what we're doing isn't going to be enough to get our church off the ground. And there are also times where you're going to have to kind of slow it down and hit the brake and pump the brakes and tell people, hey, this is okay. This is a time to breathe. We've got a lot going on. We are seeing the momentum we want. Share the vision in a clear manner. Again, coming back to another previous conversation, clear is always better than clever. And so each step of the way, even in the launch team, you need to tell people, if you expect them to go and share the gospel, you need to tell them, I need you to go and share the gospel. Would you commit to maybe doing that 2 times this week? And that comes down just simply, you've got to tell people what's expected of them. If you expect them to be at every launch team meeting, you need to tell them that. If you have an expectation, if for some reason they can't make it, to communicate to you ahead of time, so that way you can get them key information of what they may be missing in a timely fashion. So you just, again, it's easy to get bitter almost when people aren't following your expectations, but you owe it to them to clarify what your expectations are before you can get upset with them. Share your attempts as well to build relationships and sharing the gospel with others. People need to know you're doing this, that you're not expecting something of them that you're not willing to do yourself. And they need to know both your successes and your failures. They need to hear your disappointments. They need to realize, like, you're not the next Billy Graham, that every time you seem to open your mouth, people are coming to Jesus. It's fantastic when that happens. But at the same time, they need to know, yeah, I had this conversation and it didn't go the way I hoped it would go. Would you pray for that person? But what you're doing is you're reminding them deep down inside, like, this is expected of everybody that is currently on this team. We are in this together. That you as the pastor, as the leader, as the church planter, you can't do all the heavy lifting. All the heavy lifting has to be shared by everybody as well. And it is fantastic at motivating your team if you begin to baptize people before you ever actually officially grand open the church. Think about what that would look like. I tell you, it will add fuel to the fire and your people will be ready to go. A couple other things that you want to think through when it comes to overall empowering your launch team. You want to delegate tasks, not titles. Sometimes we think we can get people to do more for us if we give them the title. That's not necessarily the case. And the hard thing is, once you actually assign somebody a title, it is really difficult to take that title away from them. And so focus on delegating tasks, not titles. Give them some level of responsibility, but they can do it without the title. Why? Leadership is something, again, we recognize it's not something that's just initially appointed. And so just because somebody carried this title or in a past experience or a past church doesn't necessarily reflect on the fact that they will do the same in this context. Leadership is something you want to recognize. So you need to put people in positions that give you the opportunity to recognize if this person truly is a leader or not, or if they're the type of leader you want on your team. Don't be in a hurry to give out authority and titles. Don't rush this. You don't want to lay hands on people too quickly. Again, it has the ability to really come back and bite you. Know what you're looking for before you actually get there. If you know you need help in children's ministry, know ahead of time, this is the type of person we're looking for. They need to have this kind of skill set. Same thing when it comes to any other area of the ministry. That way, when you spot it, you know you have it, and then you can engage it, and hopefully they'll engage back. 4 things that you want to look for when it comes to really empowering your team and even giving away greater authority. You want to think competency, chemistry, culture, and character. Number 1, competency. Can they do the job? Are they able to actually carry out what is expected of them? Number 2, what about chemistry? Do we get along? How do you test chemistry? Have you ever thought about that? Competency is fairly easy to test, but how do you test objectively a level of chemistry? Well, here's one of the tricks I always think of is, could I possibly go on vacation with this person? Could I share a hotel room with this person for 2 days and not have them drive me crazy? If I think they're going to drive me crazy, I don't add them to the team because the chemistry isn't there. Next is culture. They may have the competency to do the job. You may really get along with them, but they don't fit the organizational culture that you're building. And so if they don't fit the culture, you probably want to find another role, another spot for them to be able to fill. And then lastly, and I think this speaks for itself, it's character. If they lack character, it doesn't matter how much chemistry, how much you like them, how smart they are, how competent, or even if they fit the culture, it's going to bite you in the end. And so if there's major character issues, I would avoid that at all cost. Now, in this stage, again, you want to make sure you have an advisory team that's operational, not a board, but you need an advisory team. Your advisory team could be made up of people that are on the launch team that maybe you have a long-term working relationship with, or I would also encourage you to look outside of your current situation. Think other pastors, other people that are godly people around you that you could invite to actually serve on this team. You would looking at least probably 2 other people, maybe a few others. And what is an advisory team? They're simply there to just give you advice. They don't have an overall vote. They don't have a major say in what's going on. They're simply a sounding board for you to bring up major issues or questions or challenges and say, hey, would you just help me process this? Now, at some point, it may be helpful to actually bring some of your team members from the launch team on the advisory team as well. It could become a future fishing pool for your board or your elders. I wouldn't say that to them. Don't give them that perspective or that picture too soon. Just invite them. And again, you want competent people to be on this. How many people should be on this? Not more than 6 at the very most. Because after that, it is going to get just too much information. It's going to begin to bombard you, and you're going to have a hard time navigating what am I actually supposed to do in this process. And when should it be put together? Early on in the launch team phase, and can even operate within the first 2 years after your grand opening if you have a healthy team. And then at some point, you want to transition to an official inside governing board. During the launch team phase, this is also a great time for you to actually build credibility. And here's some ideas and thoughts to help build credibility and behind you as a leader, but also what's going on with the church and the vision of the church. Look at bringing in network leaders or coaches or supportive pastors to different information meetings. Give them an opportunity. Just allow them to speak why they're excited about this, why they may be supporting you as a planter financially, or with different items that will help the church get up and going. All those things, again, they lend to your overall credibility and buy-in and trust. You want to build and capture written quotes from network leaders and coaches. I encourage you to think you probably need early on to have 2 different websites. One is kind of a, hey, this is what's coming. Here's who we are. And it just is getting the word out behind the new church. And then when you get closer to grand opening, you want to flip to more of an outsider-focused website that is really about this is who we are, this is where we're going as a church. And so in that early phase of a church website, even in brochures or pamphlets that you're giving out, if you could share a few written quotes that you have from network leaders or coaches, it will just add trust and credibility to you and to the new church. Consider inviting one network leader or coach to attend early training meetings. Maybe they will help in the training process and preview services. Again, give them a few minutes to be able to tell and say hi to everybody and just pray for the group. Have a network leader or coach fill the pulpit for you when it's necessary in those early days of the church. This is both if for some reason you can't be there for a launch team meeting, maybe it's, your spouse has ended up having to go to the hospital and you can't be there. I would try to keep the meeting going, see if you can find somebody that could come in and fill in for you in that moment. And network leaders or your coach would be a great person to be able to bring in to be able to help facilitate that. Even when you launch the church, you're going to look at preaching the majority of the time because it just takes time for people to learn your voice, know your voice, and trust your voice. But when you do miss a Sunday and you take a Sunday off, look at having somebody that's well trusted, another pastor that's part of the network or your coach come and actually preach for you. You don't want to have the megachurch pastor down the street do that, but you want to find somebody that can, again, the quality will stay at a high standard if you're not there. Make sure in the launch team phase that evangelism is staying a priority, that it's happening during this developmental phase. And again, you want to set the evangelistic DNA to the new church, and it is critical that it starts in the launch team stage of the game. If you do this and you do it well, it will help perpetuate and fulfill your future health and impact, laying a solid foundation for being an evangelistic, bringing type of church. And I would love for you to explore, share with us as well in the community, what are some of the things that you've seen work when it comes to churches doing evangelism and keeping the evangelistic culture alive in the life of the church? Here's why it's important. If your new church is going to have 10% conversion growth, the first 100, there's a high likelihood it will have 10% conversion growth by the time you get to 300. I would even add that over time, that number will drop more and more as the church ages. Why? It's proven fact, research-based, that the longer somebody is a Christian, the fewer non-Christian friends they tend to have. And so you have to become intentional about putting yourself in positions where you stay connected and intermingle with those that are far from Christ. Now, also when it comes to this idea of prioritizing evangelism, it's true that if you have close to 70% conversion growth in the first 100, there's a high likelihood you could have 70% conversion growth at 300. Why? It's just who you are. This is what's expected. This is how we operate. And so those things are important to you. Set the foundation, set the expectation early, and you won't stray far from that as the church continues to grow.